So under those circumstances, and we'll go to the two of you, and we'll just all jump in here, with as little as 1 to 2 years before they are at least capable, they are at this threshold, and Iranian motivations of such debate, what can be done to prevent that moment from occurring?
Well, I would argue, Margaret, that we have to, we all assume that Iran is indeed pursuing a nuclear weapons capability. I think the more interesting question to ask is, why? What is their impetus for pursuing a nuclear weapons capability? And I would argue, at least in part, it's due to a sense of insecurity vis-a-vis the United States. And I think that if we try to change Iran's threat perception vis-a-vis the United States, their nuclear calculations may well change. I don't think they're simply pursuing this in a vacuum.
What do you mean, change the threat perception?
Well, I think for the last several decades, the Iranian leadership, in particular the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, really believes that deep down U.S. policy toward Iran is not behavior change, it's regime change. He believes deep down Washington wants to go back to essentially a patron-client relationship with Iran, which existed during the time of the Shah. And if we can somehow allay his sense of insecurity, and it's not going to be easy, and there are no guarantees that it's going to work, but I don't think we've really exhausted diplomacy yet.
But Iran is an immensely aggressive, violent country. It's the world's leading exporter of terror. It's the one, when the Supreme Leader Khamenei responded to Obama's olive branch the other day, he had a claque of tens of thousands standing there chanting, "Death to America, death to America." Then Ahmadinejad says, we need to have a discussion in mutual respect. Death to America, death to America. Every single one of these kind of regimes, talk about the communists, talk about the Nazis or the other fascists, they mix in their mind their own aggressive aims with some paranoia and fear. We know that Stalin was very paranoid, and Hitler was in some sense paranoid, and these dictators fantasized that people were surrounding them and out to get them. This was a projection of their own hostile aggression, and the same is true with these violent and hate-filled and very ambitious Iranians who speak constantly about their global revolution fueled by the blood of the martyrs, et cetera, et cetera.
Don't you want regime change?
I think if we bomb Iran, that dream of regime change is going to be deferred for many decades.
It's a separate question, and it's an important question. But it does remind me of the insecurity that people attributed to the Soviet Union. When the United States was the sole nuclear power at the end of World War II, we did nothing to attack the Soviet Union, yet we heard for years and years about Stalin's great insecurity. We have had many opportunities to attack Iran, and we haven't done it because we do not have aggressive intentions with respect to Iran. We just want them to stop these many aggressive actions they're undertaking, the regime is undertaking. We have no quarrel with the people of Iran. But, I mean, when I listened to you, it sounded to me like there's an endless series of abasements here that we have to undertake until Khamenei is finally persuaded we're nice guys.
Well, let me put it to you like this. We're assuming here that Iran is in pursuit of this nuclear weapons because they want to dominate the Middle East. And when you talk to people like Khamenei, he has said very openly that, in fact, Iran's best vehicle for asserting its interest throughout the region is what? It's ironically democratic elections. Because when democratic elections happen in the region, what happens? Hamas gets elected in Palestine, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Iran's Shiite co-religions in Iraq. So Iran feels that were there to be a referendum in every country in the region, it would produce political systems much more akin to Iran's than to Washington's. And the average person in the region is far more sympathetic to Tehran's worldview than Washington's. Unfortunately, I think he's right, with the one exception of Iran. Iran would be the exception to that rule. And if we were to bomb Iran, I would argue it would no longer be the exception to that rule.
I think it's also important that with these analogies to the Soviet Union, that we not imagine that Iran is a superpower. It is not. It has the bluster of a power that would dominate the region, but it doesn't dominate the region. It aspires to, but it doesn't. And its very aspiration to do so is creating a reaction on the part of the Arab states and Israel, a kind of virtual alliance against Iran, which is going to prevent it from dominating. It's been trying to export its revolution for 30 years. What has it managed to do? It did make gains with Hezbollah in Lebanon, where the Shias are the largest of the ethnic groups there. It made gains as a result of our mistakes in Iraq. But as Iraq comes together, I believe that the Iranian influence will go down quite dramatically. So, you know, for all of the bluster, we shouldn't imagine that this is a country that is actually achieving this dominance that it would assert for itself.